What is the biggest dating WTF you've experienced? I once got catfished on Tinder. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Here's the catch. This person had me meet them and acted as if they were not a different person. One of the craziest experiences of my life. Girl told me within 15 minutes of our first meeting that she was having sex with a married co-worker and her favorite part was seeing him cry in guilt after it was over. Holy crap. Not only doing that but bringing it up on a date 15 minutes in. This is the first comment that actually makes me mad. 1. She was so wrapped up in her phone that she didn't notice I had moved over and started a conversation with some other guests. 2. Asked if she could bring a friend to feel safe. Completely understandable and I was fine with it. Brought her best friend and her date. Both girls ignored us pretty much all night and we left without them. He turned out to be a pretty cool guy though and invited me to join for weekend football where I made even more friends. A girl I had been seeing for a couple of weeks or so asked me to go with her to a funeral of some guy I didn't know. What I didn't expect was that the funeral was for her fiancé. Got out of there real quick once I realized why everyone was shooting me glares the whole time. I was the side B. Beehive girl. She had a Marge Simpson hairdo, about 18 inches high. She was an actor and couldn't understand why roles would demand she cut her hair, so she turned them down. I went on 3 dates with her just to hear her stories. She was totally oblivious she was the problem. It was like I was watching a soap opera or something, but she was serious. I went on 3 dates with her just to hear her stories. Baller. I went on a Tinder date with this one girl whose bio said something like, "You won't like me, I'm a disaster." Spoiler alert. She was right, but she was pretty attractive so we went to get tea at a local hipster joint. She was obviously depressed. She told me about her hyper-competent other personality that she sometimes slipped into and how her current life goal was to move several states away from her family and work at a gas station. Even though she was a senior bio major. As the date was ending she freaked out, saying that she forgot her backpack in her last class but doesn't have a car to get back. Apparently her mom dropped her off and then went home. Half an hour away in the suburbs. So I took her to get her backpack. Then she told me that she needed me to drive her to her house because it was late and no bus was running out there. So I drove her half an hour back to her parents' house in the suburbs. On the way she told me that she actually has a boyfriend but sometimes likes to see what's out there and that this what our date was. Oh, and she also is pretty sure she's a lesbian but likes the power involved in getting a guy to like her. For some reason we never saw each other again. That's a pretty good example of the term crappy person. I had a guy ask me out on a date, and he suggested a Japanese restaurant I liked. After I ordered, the server asked him what he wanted, and he said he wasn't hungry. I asked him if he wanted to wait until he was hungry, but he said nah, he just wanted to watch me eat. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but his expression said he wasn't joking. The sushi was good though. This guy went on and on about how he hated promiscuity and W. Later on that night, he tried to go up my shirt and touch my breasts. I stopped him and said, "I thought you hated promiscuity." Code for I hate girls that won't sleep with me. My ex in HS asked me to shave every last hair on my body, like everything except for my eyebrows. I refused so she dumped me. She is now married to a guy with alopecia. No joke. Hey, I guess there's someone out there for everyone. I once went on a date where I probably said like 5 words. Girl just talked for over an hour and a half, without ever including me in the conversation. Just reminisced, complained, and bragged about her life for over 90 minuets straight. I was so taken aback that I just kind of drove home wondering if that experience was real or not. Just told my husband this story recently when we were driving around the town we grew up in and reminiscing about our teen years. There was a guy who I'd seen around town, usually across the street from a bus stop I used often that I thought was super cute. I wound up meeting him a couple of years later at mutual friend's backyard BBQ and he was cool and remembered me from that bus stop. Apparently he'd been into me from afar then too. And we decided to move to the front of the house to speak privately and possibly make out. Well, he was super drunk, and we talked and sat next to each other on the front steps and as the conversation dwindled and our faces moved closer to kiss, inches away from each other, He turns and vomits like a fire hose between his legs. I tried to comfort him a bit and then went back to the party and left shortly after. He felt terrible and asked me out later and I said frick it, let's not totally blow this guy off. Everyone gets super drunk sometimes. Sure, but his idea of a date was taking me to a graveyard in broad daylight to get drunk and I realized he was very, very dumb and I never spoke to him again. I thought this story was gonna end up being about your first date with your husband and he was too drunk to remember it. I was 17. My boyfriend was 20 or 21. We were out to dinner at a fancy place with his parents. He loudly turned to me and said, by the way, since you won't sleep with me, I'm fricking other girls. With his parents inches away, that dinner became incredibly awkward after that. I was a virgin and wasn't ready yet. Sounds like he had the brain of a 10-year-old. In my JC days had a girl invite me over for a study date. Her dad was home and we actually studied at the kitchen table. Dad seemed cool from the little bit of conversation we had. Aside from a 7-Eleven run for snacks and cigs, her dad was 10 feet away from us the whole time. I thought the date went well. We talked more than we studied, made tentative plans to see a movie. Couple days later I text her, what's your weekend looking like so we can check out a flick, grab some dinner. She replies back, it's not going to work, she wants someone more forceful. I was like, what? Apparently her running to her bedroom a few times for things she forgot was a hint to me I was supposed to follow and pounce, I guess. JC days. I'm struggling to figure out this acronym. For some reason I am stuck on Jesus Christ. I was very new to the city and ended up setting up a date with a girl off Tinder. I spent a lot of time looking into cool bars and suggested a bunch to her, but she ended up really wanting to go to a certain bar, like would not take no for an answer. I looked it up. It looked okay, nothing really that special. I figured she had some sort of thing with the people who worked there where she could escape if the date went bad. And fast forward to the date. It's going really well. She's absolutely gorgeous and the conversation is really easy. I bring up the choice of the bar and why she was so adamant on this one. She said her ex-BF works here. That throws me off. But I figured they broke up a while ago and now are just friends. So I question further, asking how long ago they broke up, and she tells me 2 weeks ago, and that he is currently our bartender. I look over at the bar, and this massive 280-pound guy is giving me the biggest death stare. I was wondering all night why he was being a dong to me. Now I understood. Got out of there pretty quickly after that. A guy I saw for less than a month, if I recall correctly, took it upon himself to vent any problems relating to the relationship that we had to a male friend of mine he didn't really know at all. In retrospect, he was a peculiar guy in many different ways, and this hampered his ability to make his own friends to whom he could vent and get advice from. At the time, however, it was incredibly strange for my friend, who explicitly told him several times, dude, Asida is my friend, not you. I have no idea who you are. Please don't come to me with complaints about her. I think it took about 4 or 5 tries, and my dumping him, for him to understand it. Some guy took my glasses, ran out of the restaurant with them. I got a text like 15 minutes later of him taking a selfie in them at his place. He said if I wanted them back I would have to come over to his. This was while I was in the Marines. I met up with this girl from POF. All seemed well from our chats and texting, so we decided to meet up for a date in Palm Springs. Nothing out there yet. I get there to find out she has kids, which she brought along but never told me about even having kids whatsoever, and without missing a beat, she asks me right there to have a contract marriage. I spit my drink out ASAP while she tried to explain how it would benefit the both of us. I just looked at her with a stern look, told her to get her crap together, told her to lose my number, and walked the heck out. She had previously told me how irresponsible her sister was. Her sister had received a positive result for herpes. Sister thought it meant she was clean and didn't have it. I don't get the logic either. A few weeks later, we had been seeing each other pretty casually. She mentioned that her sister wanted to swap. Yep, no thanks. On a 3rd or 4th date I went back to his apartment to have a glass of wine. We had a great evening until near the end he said, "Wow, I can't believe you passed almost every test." Turns out he set up his apartment with small girlfriend tests. He made sure there was little to no toilet paper to see if I would change the roll, if I rinsed my dishes, if I turned off lights behind me, where I put my jacket and shoes. Needless to say, there were no further dates. That was no man. That's his mother wearing his skin. Testing you. Not major. Online match. Meet for dinner. Tells me she is lactose intolerant. Proceeds to order food with lots of dairy products. The restaurant was small and in an old house, so the bathroom was a single closet style that happened to be less than 10 feet from our table. Her food upsets her, so she uses that loudly and leaves the door open after she's done. Yup. Still asks if we can go get ice cream afterwards. That girl likes to party. I had been dating this guy for about a month, and I knew he was pretty freshly out of another relationship. We were having beers on a patio at a tap house nearby, and his phone rings and he answers it and proceeds to talk to who I realized was his ex. They were arguing and talking about their breakup, all while he was still sitting at the table with me. After about an hour and a few beers later, a guy at the table next to me gave me kind of a nod to join his table. I did. We talked about what and butthole the other guy was being. We spent the next couple hours chatting. Douchebag left when his phone call was over, and my new friend and I ended up dating for a year and we're still friends to this day. I've been on and off the dating app life for a couple of years now. I just got my first big boy job and moved to a new area. I matched with this cute girl who was a junior in college nearby. We had a nice first date, got coffee and walked around. We set plans to grab lunch that weekend. During lunch we decided to go on an impromptu hike. I drove us to my house to grab some water, snacks, change clothes, and we had a nice hike. Everything was going pretty darn well. We texted and kept up throughout the week. That Friday I was at a friend's house. We had a few drinks, so I didn't feel comfortable driving back home. He didn't have an Android charger and my phone was dying, so I sent a courtesy text to her to let her know I was going to be out of commission for a while. The next morning, I get home and charge in my phone. After a few seconds I get a slew of text messages, around 50, all from her. It was a spiral into insanity. At first she told me to go have fun and have a good night. Then it went from that to, hey, are you free too? Why aren't you talking to me? And near the latter she mentioned she drove by my house and didn't see my car. She accused me of sleeping around. Basically any and every insecurity got projected onto me within a couple of hours, all while I was asleep. I called it off immediately. She probably had some deeper issues and I hope she has gotten help, is happy. It was just the transition from a few nice dates to that night that really made me take a step back and go, what the actual frick. I said something the guy I was dating at the time didn't like, so to punish me he punched himself 3 times in the jaw and knocked out a tooth. Should have kept saying it for a TKO. A year ago I met up with a girl I met on a dating site. We went out for coffee and had a good talk about movies and video games. Then everything got weird when she asked if she could read me some of her poetry about her ex-boyfriend cheating on her. She proceeded to sob in public in the middle of the poem, and wouldn't stop until she was finished with her very long poem despite being a blubbering, sniffling mess. There was no second date. Her next date heard her poems about her date with the guy who didn't like poetry. Her date after that was easier, because she could just reuse the poems from the previous date. On 2 separate occasions, I've gone home with a guy after a perfectly lovely first date to find an array of BDSM toys laid out on the bed, ready for use. Don't get me wrong, I'm generally down, but you can't just spring that on someone. Guys, there has to be a discussion before you bring out a leather hood and the Flogotron 3000. In both cases, there was no second date. He made me Uber to him, $20 one way to a nice building, so we could Uber together to a bar by my condo. Cost me $40 to go somewhere 2 blocks from my place. I don't get it. He then pulled a pint of Svedka out and chugged it in one shot at the bar. He ordered 2 drinks and shoved me the bill. He hit on the bartender in a language I don't speak. She was very uncomfortable. He then asked me where I lived, told him the name of the building. He decided that he liked my building better than his, and wanted to stay with me for a few days to check it out to buy a penthouse. I said no, but he could contact a realtor. He went batshit. I looked down and he's on Tinder while screaming at me. He showed me a girl and said he was going to frick her if I didn't let him in. Told him to go for it. I am not interested. He followed me the whole walk to my place, stumbling grabbing my arm and screaming at me. He tried to steal my purse. The police ended up coming up to me and holding him long enough for me to get home. He sent me a series of bizarre threatening messages at night and kept randomly messaging me that he loved me. I am a bee. I am his only hope. I am going to get raped. I posted about it on FB and some other friends had run-ins with him. Guess he's homeless and was getting by staying at people's houses and borrowing their stuff to look like he was somewhat wealthy to con more people. If I had let him in, it'd have been screwed. It was a crap show of events for a first date. Not gonna bother doing the full version, so here is the short. Took girl on a hiking date. She brought a machete. She stripped naked and started whacking through the foliage with her blade, and then got mad at me and threw roadkill at me. My type. Met a girl for a first date at a local bar. We had a few too many, so decided to Uber back to my place. Girl decides she's going to try and polish my lap rocket in the backseat of the Uber. I was able to spare myself and the driver of that situation. We get back to my place and start going at it. Next thing I know it's 4 AM and she's climbing back into bed. I get up to use the bathroom and step in something. I flick the lights on. There is puke everywhere. Everywhere. Girl puked on the toilet lid, and it splashed all over the bathroom. The sink, the walls, the shower curtain, the mirror. Bile and stout is everywhere. I spent the next 30 minutes cleaning it up, then took a shower, made myself some coffee and thought about what TF just happened. It was an awkward Uber back to our cars that morning for one of us. I didn't have the nuts to tell her what she had done and I don't think she knows. Yo, props to you dude. He thought it would be mad sexy to whip his dong out right in front of me and order me to suck it while we were sitting in a park in broad daylight. I wish I was kidding. I have also had that happen to me. I went on a very boring date with a very dull, not talkative girl. I tried every couple of minutes to initiate any conversation until I honestly ran dry of something or anything to talk about and decided that it really isn't going to work, so I sat in silence while I finished my drink with complete intention of saying goodbye once I'd finished. 2 sips left and she said something. I kid you not, these were her words. "So are you going to kiss me at the end of this?" I was in shock and didn't know what to say. She then proceeded to cry and get up saying, "I knew I was ugly," and walked away. No, it's just your personality. Back in the early 90s my friend set me up on a blind date with a cousin or something. Can't really remember that part. Anyway, we met at a restaurant and had a decent meal with so-so conversation. But the weird part was she requested a specific table. I didn't really ask why as it didn't bother me. Occasionally throughout dinner I thought I noticed her doing facial expressions and hand gestures that seemed odd. The other thing I noticed, after the fact, was she made 3 trips to the restroom. When I got up to use the restroom, on my way back to the table I noticed that where our table was and where she was sitting had her facing the bar area and that there was a lady sitting facing her on the other side of the bar. I kinda thought something was up but shrugged it off. After dinner we went to a bar to have a couple drinks. I was already getting weird vibes, but what the heck. We end up sitting at one of the high top tables by the bar and again she sits facing the bar. Facial expressions and hand gestures start up again pretty quick, but this time more obvious. She excuses herself to use the restroom again and I notice that a lady kinda meets her there and they go in together. They come out together and as my date sits at my table the lady walks pat to the bar. Same lady from the restaurant. Now I'm really like WTF, so I really start paying attention to what's going on with her expressions and gestures and it becomes very apparent that she is communicating with this lady. Finally I'm like, WTF, who is that lady you are communicating with? She comes clean and says it's her mother. She always tags along on dates. Once we have a few more and I get to know her it won't be so awkward. She just really wants her to settle down so she can have grandkids and wants to be sure the future son-in-law is up to her standards. My response? Waiter, check please. I paid the tab and hauled butt. Imagine some poor guy having to deal with that in the future. Every decision he makes in marriage has to be approved by said mother. I had a date suggest we meet up for drinks. He showed up about 10 minutes late, 2 sheets to the wind. He orders another whiskey and then for about 20 minutes tried to carry on conversation without acknowledging the fact he was clearly incredibly drunk. I casually asked if he drank beforehand and he told me he had a bunch of whiskey beforehand in preparation for the date to calm his nerves. Okay, I get it. Then he continues to explain that he's only drunk because I'm pretty and that he was so eager to make a good impression he decided to drink. And then he puked. Needless to say, the whiskey did not make a good first impression. I had a girl set a whole thing up where she was straddling me in panties only to ask to lick my eye. And, she added, she had a contact kit and stuff so it was safe. So she made a plan to lure me to her place, seduce me, all with the end goal of licking my freaking eyeball. She was hot too. Being an idiot and in high school I left. I wish I'd banged you freaky eye lady. I'm a single father with full custody of my kids. I was dating a girl for a couple months and she asked me why couldn't I just see my kids every other weekend like normal dads. She knew my situation from the very beginning. She also took it upon herself to message my kid's mother and tell her that she needed to step up as a parent so she could have more time with me. She got less time with me after those two things. A lot less. No time, to be exact. The second date I had with this fairly attractive girl who, after a few drinks, proceeded to talk about how she was curious about scat play, ran away like my hair was on fire. Pro tip, that's not a good way to put out hair fire. We were talking about the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and I asked him what his wish would be. His response? I'd wanna be able to kill someone. Needless to say we aren't dating anymore. When I was in college, my buddy at the comic shop asked me what animal I'd be if I had to become a non-human animal. With barely a second's thought I say a dolphin, because they're murderous rapists that are universally beloved. He respected the answer, but was troubled by how quickly it came up. In hindsight, so am I. Several years ago, but the woman that told me she was only in California for rehab for her severe C addiction. Oh, and she was still in love with her ex-boyfriend. But don't worry, he had died 3 months prior from an overdose. Nope. I got sort of abducted on the second date. I got a text saying she wanted to take me somewhere special. I figured she meant a bar nearby or restaurant or something. I'm in Chicago. Nope. Still didn't tell me where she was taking me and she drove me an hour and a half away to her parents' place for some reason. She was really attractive so I stupidly went with it. Got there and she started playing with a dead bird on the ground and told me she kept gloves in her car so could pick up dead animals normally. That wasn't enough to deter my meatbag brain as we proceeded to bone. She then tried to get me to take off work and refused to take me back so I had to take a very expensive Uber to work. Texted me a few hours later how much she missed me. I blocked her immediately after that. Makes for a fun story though. Went on a date with this guy who seemed nice enough. I was having a decent time. Then he drove us out into the middle of nowhere in the pitch black night and locked the doors. I was sure I was gonna die, but after I told him to take me home he listened so that's cool. One time I went on a date with a guy who I was classmates with. We'd been flirting with each other for a few weeks, and he seemed cool. The first part of the date was totally normal until he started talking about his faith. He was a member of an Orthodox Presbyterian church outside of town. He believed, as did his church, in the concept of predestination, which meant that he was saved from birth and that I, not a member of his church, was headed straight for heck no matter what I did. He discussed this in length, with excruciating detail. Literally, the entire conversation revolved around me going to heck. I remember asking him point blank why he wanted to date someone doomed to burn in heck, and he told me that it didn't matter what he did, he'd still get into heaven. We never spoke again after that. Mayo, wow, that's not even what the concept of predestination is. Seems he legit had no idea what he was talking about, lol. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.